The fluorescent lights in Ward C flickered at 2 in the morning, casting shadows across the empty corridor. David Chen pressed his forehead against the cold wall outside room 307, his hand still trembling. He had just finished his rounds when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong in the sterile silence of the night shift. Crying. Not the kind of crying he was used to from patients in pain. This was different. This was the sound of someone who had lost everything. He pushed open the door. Catherine Wells lay in the hospital bed, her silver hair spread across the pillow like a halo. The woman who owned half the city's real estate, whose face appeared on magazine covers, whose name opened every door in Manhattan. She was alone. Completely, devastatingly alone. Her chart said stable condition, post-surgery recovery, family notified. But the reality was uglier. Her son had been here 3 hours ago. David had seen him in the parking lot, laughing on his phone, telling someone he had finally convinced the lawyers his mother was mentally unfit. Catherine's eyes opened when she sensed his presence. They were gray, like storm clouds, and filled with a recognition that made David's chest tighten. She had seen him before, yesterday, when the billing department had cornered him in the lobby, loudly informing him that his daughter's treatment would be discontinued without immediate payment, when he had begged on his knees in front of strangers. She whispered 4 words that would change everything. You understand this, don't you? Before we continue, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing how far these stories reach across the world. And if you believe stories about real connection and chosen family deserve to be told, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, let me take you back to where this impossible bond truly began. 48 hours earlier, David Chen had believed in systems. He believed that if you worked hard enough, showed up for every shift, followed every rule, the world would meet you halfway. He believed that good people got second chances. He believed that hospitals were places of mercy. He stopped believing all of that on a Tuesday afternoon in the main lobby of St. Augustine Memorial Hospital. The billing department manager, a woman named Patricia Moore, with a voice that could cut glass, had called his name across the crowded waiting room. Not quietly, not discreetly. She wanted an audience, and she got one. Conversations stopped, heads turned. David had been picking up an extra shift, still wearing his scrubs from the previous night, his eyes red from exhaustion. Mr. Chen, we need to discuss your daughter's account. Patricia stood near the reception desk, her arms crossed, a manila folder clutched against her chest like a weapon. You're 3 months overdue. The experimental treatment program requires payment up front. We've been more than generous with extensions. David felt his face flush hot. He moved toward her quickly, trying to keep his voice low. I asked to speak privately. I have a payment plan proposal. Your payment plan proposals haven't worked. Patricia opened the folder and David saw numbers. So many numbers. $240,000 for the experimental leukemia treatment. The only treatment that had shown promise for Emma's specific condition. The only chance his 7-year-old daughter had at surviving past her 8th birthday. The hospital board has made a decision. Without 50% down payment by Friday, we'll have to transfer your daughter to standard care protocols. Standard care protocols. The words tasted like ash. Standard care meant watching Emma fade slowly over 6 months instead of 3. It meant comfort measures. It meant giving up. Please. The word came out broken. David hated the sound of his own voice, hated the desperation that dripped from it. I'm working double shifts. I've sold everything I own. I just need more time. She's responding to the treatment. Dr. Reeves said her numbers are improving. Dr. Reeves doesn't make financial decisions. Patricia's expression didn't change. Clinical. Cold. She had probably had this conversation 100 times before. The hospital isn't a charity, Mr. Chen. We have operational costs. If you can't afford the treatment, there are other facilities. Other facilities won't take her case. David's voice rose despite himself. The entire lobby was watching now. An elderly man with a walker, a pregnant woman holding her belly, 2 paramedics wheeling in a gurney, all of them witnesses to his failure as a father. She's been rejected by 4 programs already. This is her only shot, and you know it. Patricia closed the folder with a snap that echoed through the silence. Then I suggest you figure out how to make $50,000 appear by Friday. Otherwise, I'll personally authorize her transfer. She turned on her heel and walked away, her shoes clicking against the marble floor like a countdown clock. David stood there, frozen, as the whispers started. He felt every eye on him, judging, pitying. Some people looked away quickly, embarrassed to witness his humiliation. Others stared openly, their expressions ranging from sympathy to contempt. A security guard moved closer, as if David might cause a scene. He didn't cause a scene. He simply sank to his knees in the middle of the lobby floor. His hands came together automatically, fingers interlaced, knuckles white. He didn't know who he was praying to anymore. God had stopped listening months ago, right around the time Emma's hair had started falling out in clumps. But he prayed anyway, because what else could he do? His lips moved silently, forming words he had said so many times they had lost all meaning. Please, save her. I'll do anything. The lobby remained silent. No divine intervention. No miracle. Just the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant beep of medical equipment, and the weight of 100 strangers' pity pressing down on his shoulders. Someone cleared their throat above him. David looked up, expecting security to escort him out. Instead, he found himself staring at polished Italian leather shoes. Expensive ones. His gaze traveled upward, tailored black slacks, a cashmere coat, and finally, a face he recognized from billboards and business magazines. Catherine Wells. Even in person, even standing in a hospital lobby, she radiated the kind of wealth that most people only saw in movies. But it was her eyes that stopped him. They weren't looking at him with pity. They were looking at him with something else. Recognition, maybe, or remembrance. Like she was seeing someone she used to know. Get up, she said quietly. Her voice was refined, educated, but there was a roughness underneath it. Something worn down. You're making a spectacle of yourself. David scrambled to his feet, his knees aching. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I wasn't criticizing. Catherine tilted her head slightly, studying him. I was observing. There's a difference. She glanced toward the elevator bay where Patricia had disappeared. That woman is a vulture. I should know. My family has donated enough to this hospital to name 3 wings. They smile at me and bleed people like you dry. David didn't know what to say. His throat was tight, and he was afraid that if he spoke, he would start crying in front of Manhattan's most powerful real estate developer. That seemed like it would somehow make the day even worse. Catherine seemed to sense his struggle. She reached into her purse, an understated black leather bag that probably cost more than David's car, and pulled out a business card. Come see me tomorrow. 4th floor, executive suite. 2 o'clock. She pressed the card into his hand before he could refuse. Don't be late, I hate waiting. Then she walked away, her heels clicking in the same rhythm Patricia's had, but somehow the sound was different, purposeful instead of punishing. David looked down at the card, embossed gold lettering. Catherine Wells, CEO, Wells Capital Properties. A phone number, an address in Midtown. He turned it over, half expecting to find some catch, some condition, but the back was blank. He went home that night and held Emma while she slept. Her breathing was shallow, her skin pale. The experimental treatment had bought them time, but time was running out faster than he could count it. She stirred once, her eyes fluttering open, and smiled at him with that gap-toothed grin that used to light up their entire apartment. Daddy, you smell like hospital, she mumbled. I know, baby. Go back to sleep. Are you sad? The question hit him like a punch. He forced a smile. No, sweetheart. I'm just tired. You're always tired. She reached up and touched his face with her small hand. Her fingers were cold. Too cold. But it's okay. I'm not scared. You always fix everything. He kissed her forehead and waited until she drifted back to sleep before he let himself cry. The next day, David stood outside Wells Capital Properties at exactly 1:55, staring up at the glass and steel building that seemed to pierce the clouds. He had changed out of his scrubs into the only dress shirt he owned, wrinkled despite his best efforts, and his hands wouldn't stop shaking. The security guard in the lobby called upstairs, eyebrows raised in surprise when clearance was immediately granted. The elevator ride to the 4th floor felt like ascending into another dimension. Everything was marble and mirrors and money. Catherine's assistant, a severe-looking woman in her 50s, led him down a corridor lined with abstract art that David suspected cost more than his entire life savings. She opened a door to a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. Catherine sat behind a desk made of dark wood and chrome, typing on a laptop. She didn't look up immediately. Close the door, she said. Sit. David obeyed, sinking into a leather chair that was more comfortable than his own bed. Catherine finally looked at him, her gray eyes sharp and assessing. "I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to answer honestly. Can you do that?" "Yes, ma'am." "Don't call me ma'am. It makes me feel ancient." She folded her hands on the desk. "How far would you go to save your daughter?" The question hung in the air between them. David thought about Emma's laugh, the way she still believed in fairy tales, the drawings she made of them as superheroes fighting monsters together. He thought about her empty chair at the breakfast table, her unused backpack, the future she deserved and might never have. "Anything?" he said simply. "I would do anything." Catherine nodded slowly, as if this was the answer she had been waiting for. "Good, because I need something from you, and in return, I can give you everything you need." She stood and walked to the window, her back to him. "I'm dying, Mr. Chen. Pancreatic cancer, stage 3. The surgery you saw me scheduled for yesterday was my second attempt at resection. My doctors give me 6 months, maybe 8 if I'm lucky, and the treatment works." David's breath caught. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be useful." She turned to face him, and her expression was harder now. "Business. I have one son, Marcus. He's 32 years old, and he's been waiting for me to die since his father passed away 10 years ago. He doesn't call unless he needs money. He doesn't visit unless his lawyers tell him to. Yesterday, he came to the hospital for exactly 17 minutes. I timed it. He spent 14 of those minutes on his phone with his accountant, discussing how quickly he could liquidate my assets." David felt a chill run down his spine. He had seen Marcus Wells in the parking lot. Laughing, Catherine continued, her voice steady but her jaw tight. "I built an empire from nothing. I clawed my way up from a 1-bedroom apartment in Queens to this." She gestured at the office. The view, the city sprawled beneath them. "I sacrificed everything for my company and for my son. I gave him the best schools, the best opportunities, and he grew up to be a stranger who sees me as an inheritance delay." She walked back to her desk and pulled out a folder, the same kind Patricia had held. But when Catherine opened it, David saw different numbers. Medical bills. His medical bills. "I know everything about you, David Chen. I had you investigated last night." She met his eyes without apology. "Widower. Wife died in childbirth 7 years ago. You've raised your daughter alone while working night shifts as a trauma nurse. No criminal record. No debt beyond medical expenses. Every single person I spoke to at the hospital said you're the best nurse they've ever worked with. Compassionate, dedicated, the kind of person who stays late to hold a patient's hand when they're scared." David's face burned. "Why? Because I need to know if you're worth the investment." Catherine sat down again, her posture perfect, her gaze unwavering. "Here's my proposal. I will pay for your daughter's entire treatment. Every cent. The experimental program, the medications, the hospital stays, everything. I'll also clear your existing debt and set up a trust fund for her education and future care. In return, you will become my son." The words didn't make sense at first. David blinked. "I don't understand. Publicly, you will be my family. You'll visit me in the hospital every day. You'll accompany me to social events when I'm well enough. You'll stand beside me at board meetings and charity galas. You'll call me mother in front of cameras and colleagues." Catherine's voice was clinical, as if she was negotiating a merger. "I'm going to rewrite my will. Marcus will get a token amount. The rest, my company, my properties, my assets, will be placed in a foundation managed by you and a board of trustees. The foundation will fund medical research and help families like yours who fall through the cracks." David's heart was pounding. "You want me to pretend to be your son? I want you to be what a son should be." Catherine's composure cracked slightly, and for just a moment David saw the woman who had been crying alone in a hospital bed. "I don't need pretend affection. I need someone who understands what it means to actually care about another human being. Someone who won't see me as a bank account with a pulse. Someone who might sit with me when I'm scared and not check their watch every 5 minutes." She slid a contract across the desk. "This is legally binding. You fulfill the terms. Daily visits, public appearances, genuine companionship until my death or recovery, and your daughter gets her treatment. You break the terms, the money stops. Simple." David's hands shook as he picked up the contract. The words blurred together. Compensation, duration, obligations, termination clauses. It was insane. Absolutely insane. A billionaire was offering to save his daughter's life in exchange for him playing the role of devoted son. But he thought about Emma, about her smile, about the way she still drew pictures of their family with her mom included as an angel, about how she deserved to grow up and fall in love, and have children of her own, and live a full, beautiful life. "What about your real son?" David asked quietly. "Marcus." Catherine's laugh was bitter. "Marcus made his choice. Now I'm making mine." She leaned forward. "I'm not asking you to love me, David. I'm asking you to show up. Can you do that?" David looked at the contract, at the numbers that would save Emma, at the face of a woman who had everything except what mattered most. He picked up the pen on her desk. "Where do I sign?" Catherine exhaled, and David realized she had been holding her breath, uncertain of his answer. She pointed to the signature line. "Here, and here, initial every page." He signed. His hand moved mechanically through the pages, committing himself to something he couldn't fully comprehend. When he finished, Catherine took the contract, slid it into a drawer, and extended her hand across the desk. "Then we have an agreement." Her grip was firm, strong. "The money for Emma's treatment will be wired to the hospital within the hour. You start tomorrow. I expect you at my hospital room by 6 p.m. Don't bring flowers. I hate flowers. Bring yourself and be prepared to answer questions. The nurses will talk. The press will investigate. This needs to look real." David stood, his legs unsteady. "Thank you. I don't know how to—" "Don't thank me yet." Catherine's expression softened slightly. "You just sold your life to a dying woman you don't know. You might regret this." But as David left her office and rode the elevator back down to street level, as he called the hospital, and heard Patricia's shocked silence when she confirmed the payment had cleared, as he raced to Emma's room and held his daughter while the nurses cheered, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would never regret saving his child. What he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was that Catherine Wells had just saved him too. The first visit was awkward. David arrived at Catherine's private suite at exactly 6 p.m., as instructed. He had changed into clean scrubs, the only professional clothes he owned that didn't look like they had been through a war. His palms were sweating. He had rehearsed what to say a dozen times on the subway ride over, but every script sounded ridiculous in his head. How did you greet a woman who had just bought your loyalty? Catherine was sitting up in bed, her laptop balanced on a tray table, reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked up when he knocked. "You're punctual. Good." She gestured to the chair beside her bed. "Sit. We need to establish ground rules." David sat. The chair was the same kind he had sat in hundreds of times during his shifts, but somehow it felt different being on this side of the exchange. "Okay. First rule, honesty. If you're uncomfortable, say so. If you think I'm being unreasonable, say so. I'm paying for authenticity, not performance." Catherine closed her laptop. "Second rule, boundaries. I won't ask about your wife unless you want to talk about her. You won't ask about my ex-husband unless I bring him up. We keep painful topics off limits until trust is earned. That seems fair. Third rule, Emma comes first, always." Catherine's expression was firm. "If she needs you, you leave. I don't care if I'm in the middle of surgery or a board meeting. Your daughter's well-being trumps this arrangement. Understood?" David felt something tight in his chest loosen. "Understood." "Good." Catherine picked up a folder from her bedside table. "Now the press is already circulating rumors. My assistant leaked a story to page 6 about my estranged son, returning to reconcile. They'll run it tomorrow. We need to be ready for questions." They spent the next hour crafting a backstory. David was her son from a brief relationship in her 20s, raised by his father, reconnecting now after years apart. It was close enough to believable, far enough from the truth to avoid immediate scrutiny. Catherine walked him through her business empire, her social circles, the people he would need to recognize and charm. It felt like studying for an exam he couldn't afford to fail. "You look terrified," Catherine observed. "I am terrified." David rubbed his face. "I'm a nurse. I don't know anything about corporate boards or charity galas or— You know how to care for people. That's more than most of them know." Catherine's voice softened. "I'm not asking you to become someone else, David. I'm asking you to be exactly who you are. That's the point." The word settled over him like a blanket. He nodded. "Now go home," Catherine said, Emma needs dinner and you need rest. Tomorrow we go public. David stood to leave but paused at the door. Can I ask you something? You can ask. I may not answer. Why me? You could have hired an actor. Someone trained for this. Catherine was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was distant. Because when I saw you on your knees in that lobby begging for your daughter's life, I saw something I haven't seen in 30 years. Someone who actually loves more than they fear. Someone who would destroy themselves to save another person. She met his eyes. Marcus has never looked at me the way you looked at that billing manager. Like I was his entire world on fire. I wanted to know what that felt like, even if I have to buy it. David didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and left. The next day, page 6 ran the headline, Billionaire Catherine Wells reunites with secret son. The article was accompanied by a photo someone had taken of David entering her hospital suite. His face was grainy but recognizable. His phone started ringing before he even finished reading the piece. The hospital administrator called first, asking if the rumors were true. Then, a reporter from the Times. Then 3 calls from numbers he didn't recognize. He ignored them all and focused on what mattered. Emma's first day of resumed treatment. Dr. Reeves met him in the oncology ward with tears in her eyes. I don't know what miracle you pulled off, David, but that little girl has a real chance now. She hugged him tight. We're starting the next round this afternoon. David watched through the window as nurses prepared Emma's IV. She was reading a picture book, her bald head catching the fluorescent light, completely unaware of the machinery of wealth and desperation that had granted her this reprieve. Daddy! Emma's face lit up when she saw him. Dr. Reeves said I get to stay in the special program. He went to her, kissed her forehead. That's right, baby. Did you fix it? Like you always do. Something like that. Emma studied his face with that unnerving intuition children have. You look different. Did something good happen? David smiled. Yeah, something good happened. That evening, he brought Emma with him to visit Catherine. He had asked permission first, half expecting Catherine to refuse, but she had surprised him. Bring her, Catherine had said simply. I'd like to meet the reason you're doing this. Emma held David's hand tightly as they walked down the corridor to the private suite. She was wearing her favorite dress, yellow with sunflowers, and a knitted cap to cover her head. Is this the nice lady who helped us? She whispered. Yes. Be polite, okay? I'm always polite. Emma sounded offended. Catherine was sitting in the chair by the window when they entered, no longer confined to bed. She had dressed carefully. A silk blouse, tailored pants, her hair styled. She looked every inch the powerful executive, except for the IV port visible at her wrist. Her eyes went to Emma immediately, and something in her expression shifted, softened. Hello, she said quietly. Emma let go of David's hand and walked forward with the fearless curiosity of a 7-year-old. Hi, I'm Emma. Are you Daddy's new friend? Catherine glanced at David, then back to Emma. I suppose I am. He needs friends. He works too much. Emma climbed onto the chair next to Catherine without invitation. Are you sick too? Emma, David started, but Catherine held up a hand. Yes, Catherine said simply. I'm sick too. Does it hurt? Sometimes. Emma nodded sagely. Me too, but the doctors are really nice here, and the nurses bring me ice cream. She pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket. I drew this for you. Daddy said you helped me get my medicine, so I wanted to say thank you. Catherine took the drawing with careful hands. It was a crayon sketch of 3 stick figures, one tall with dark hair labeled Daddy, one small with a yellow dress labeled Me, and one with silver hair and a crown labeled The Nice Lady. Catherine stared at the picture for a long moment. David watched her throat work as she swallowed hard. This is beautiful, she whispered. Thank you, Emma. You're welcome. Emma leaned against the armrest, completely comfortable. Do you like stories? Daddy reads me stories every night, but he does funny voices and it makes me laugh. I haven't read stories in a very long time. That's sad. Emma frowned. Stories are the best part of the day. Do you want to read one with me? I brought my book. Before Catherine could answer, Emma had pulled a battered copy of The Velveteen Rabbit from David's bag and thrust it into Catherine's hands. This one is my favorite. It's about a toy that becomes real because someone loves him very much. Catherine looked at David helplessly. He shrugged, equally helpless. Emma had a way of steamrolling through social conventions. I don't want to impose, Catherine began. You're not posing. You're reading. Emma settled into the chair more comfortably. Start at the beginning. That's where stories start. And so Catherine Wells, CEO of a billion-dollar empire, woman who had negotiated deals with mayors and senators, opened a children's book and began to read. Her voice was hesitant at first, rusty from disuse. But as she read about the velveteen rabbit and the skin horse and the magic of becoming real, something remarkable happened. She stopped reading like she was in a boardroom and started reading like she was telling a secret. Emma listened with rapt attention, occasionally interrupting to ask questions or point at the illustrations. Catherine answered each question with surprising patience. David watched from the doorway, afraid to move, afraid to break whatever spell was being woven in that hospital room. When Catherine reached the end, when the rabbit became real and was finally free, Emma sighed contentedly. See, that's the best part, when love makes you real. Catherine closed the book carefully. Yes, she said softly, that is the best part. Emma yawned, the exhaustion of her treatment catching up with her. David moved forward. Time to go, sweetheart. Catherine needs to rest. Can we come back tomorrow? Emma asked, looking up at Catherine with hopeful eyes. Catherine hesitated. David saw the conflict on her face, the woman who had learned not to trust, not to hope, warring with the woman who had just spent 30 minutes reading to a dying child and felt something she thought she had lost forever. Yes, Catherine said finally. I would like that very much. Emma hugged her, quick and fierce and completely unexpected. Catherine froze, her arms hovering uncertainly, before slowly, carefully, hugging back. As David carried a sleepy Emma out of the room, he glanced back. Catherine was still holding the drawing, staring at it like it was a contract worth more than all her properties combined. The visits became routine. David came every evening after his shift, sometimes with Emma, sometimes alone. Catherine taught Emma chess. Emma taught Catherine how to make friendship bracelets from embroidery thread. They read stories. They played cards. They talked about everything and nothing. The press coverage intensified. Photographers camped outside the hospital. Reporters dug into David's background, finding nothing scandalous except a heartbreaking story of a single father fighting to save his daughter. Public opinion swung firmly in Catherine's favor. Finally, the Ice Queen billionaire was showing her human side. Marcus called Catherine once during those weeks. David was in the room when she answered. Mother. Marcus's voice was cold even through the speakerphone. I see you're making quite the spectacle with your new pet project. His name is David. Catherine's tone was arctic. And he's shown me more genuine care in 3 weeks than you've shown in 30 years. He's using you. Can't you see that? He needed money for his daughter, and you were convenient. At least he needed me for something beyond my death certificate. Catherine's words were sharp as knives. When was the last time you visited because you wanted to, Marcus? Not because your lawyers told you to establish presence for the estate fight. Silence on the other end. That's what I thought. Catherine ended the call. David had expected her to be upset, but instead she seemed almost relieved, like she had finally said something she had been holding back for years. 6 weeks into the arrangement, Emma's numbers improved dramatically. The experimental treatment was working better than anyone had dared hope. Dr. Reeves used words like remission and optimistic and long-term survival. David cried in the hospital bathroom for 20 minutes, overwhelming gratitude crashing over him in waves. That night he came to Catherine's suite and found her standing by the window, looking out at the city lights. Emma's going to make it, he said. Catherine turned, and he saw tears on her face. I know, Dr. Reeves called me. You asked her to call you? I wanted to know the moment there was news. Catherine wiped her eyes impatiently. Is that strange? I barely know her. No. David moved closer. It's not strange. They stood together in silence, watching the city breathe below them. Finally, Catherine spoke. I never did this with Marcus. The reading, the games, the just being present. Her voice was thick with regret. I was building an empire. I thought providing for him was the same as loving him. I thought money could replace time. It's not too late. Yes, it is. Catherine's laugh was hollow. He made his choice about who I am. I can't unmake 30 years of mistakes. She looked at David. But I can be better now. With Emma. With you. If you'll let me. David thought about the contract locked in her desk drawer. About the transactional nature of their arrangement. About how he was supposed to be performing a role. But somewhere along the way, Something had shifted. He looked forward to these visits. He found himself wanting to tell Catherine about his day, about the difficult patient who finally smiled, about the nurse who made a joke that actually landed. He found himself caring whether she ate her dinner, whether her pain levels were manageable, whether she was lonely. "You already are," he said quietly. Catherine's face crumpled. She reached for him, and David did something that wasn't in any contract. He hugged her, really hugged her, and she held on like she was drowning, and he was the only solid thing in an ocean of uncertainty. "Thank you," she whispered against his shoulder, "for showing up, for being here, for being—" She didn't finish the sentence, but David understood. "For being real." The midpoint came on a Tuesday night. Emma was asleep in her hospital bed, having spent the afternoon with Catherine learning about the stock market through a game involving candy pieces as shares. David and Catherine sat in her suite, playing chess in comfortable silence. Catherine moved her knight. Check. And David studied the board, realized he had walked into a trap. "You're ruthless. I've been playing this game for 50 years. You're going to lose." But she was smiling. "Emma's being discharged next week," David said, moving his king. "Outpatient treatment from here on." "That's wonderful." Catherine captured his bishop. "You must be relieved." "I am." He met her eyes across the chessboard. "I'm also grateful. I know I've said it before, but—" "Then don't say it again." Catherine's voice was gentle. "This arrangement has given me something too, something I didn't know I was missing." "What's that?" Catherine was quiet for a moment, her fingers resting on her queen. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Purpose. For the first time in a decade, I wake up wanting to see what happens next. I want to hear about Emma's day. I want to beat you at chess. I want to watch you both walk through that door." She looked up at him, her gray eyes bright with unshed tears. "You and Emma gave me a reason to keep fighting this disease. You gave me something worth living for." David felt his throat tighten. "Catherine, I'm not finished." She moved her queen with shaking hands. "Checkmate." But she wasn't looking at the board anymore. "I know this started as a transaction, money for companionship, but it's not that anymore, is it?" David shook his head slowly. "No, it's not." "Good." Catherine exhaled, as if she had been holding her breath waiting for his answer. "Because I need you to know something. When I die, and I will die, the doctors are clear about that, I need you to understand that these months with you and Emma have been the most genuine relationship I've had in my entire life. You're not my son by blood, but you've been more of a son than the one I raised." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. David reached across the chessboard and took her hand. "You're not going to die. You're too stubborn." Catherine laughed, the sound wet with tears. "Stubborn only gets you so far. Then we'll be stubborn together." She squeezed his hand. "Deal." Outside the window, the city lights blurred and sparkled. Inside that room, two people who had started as strangers bound by desperation had become something neither of them had expected. They had become family, and for the first time in her life, Catherine Wells understood what the Velveteen Rabbit had learned. That being real wasn't about perfection or performance or transaction. It was about showing up. It was about being present. It was about letting yourself be loved, even when you didn't think you deserved it. David stayed until Catherine fell asleep in her chair, exhausted from medication and emotion. He covered her with a blanket, turned off the lights, and left quietly. He didn't know that in 3 weeks everything would fall apart. He didn't know that the foundation they had built was about to be tested by forces neither of them could control. He didn't know that the hardest part was still ahead. But for tonight, standing in the hospital corridor with Catherine's hand-drawn family portrait folded in his pocket, he let himself believe in the impossible. He let himself believe they had all the time in the world. Marcus Wells had been patient. Patience was a virtue his mother had tried to teach him, though she had failed at teaching him most other things that mattered. But patience had its limits, and Marcus had reached his 3 months after David Chen entered his mother's life. He sat in his attorney's office on Fifth Avenue, reviewing the private investigator's report for the 3rd time. The manila folder was thick with surveillance photos, financial records, and a timeline that made his blood boil. "This is fraud," Marcus said flatly. "She's being manipulated by a con artist." His attorney, Gerald Strauss, a man who had made his fortune defending the indefensible, shook his head. "It's not fraud if she entered the arrangement willingly." And according to the contract, which we obtained through discovery, she initiated the entire thing. She offered him money in exchange for companionship. That's legal. It's elder abuse. She's 62 and mentally competent. The doctors confirm she's lucid and making informed decisions. Gerald leaned back in his leather chair. What you have here is a dying woman who chose to spend her money on someone who makes her happy. Judges tend to be sympathetic to that. Marcus slammed the folder onto the desk. He's a nobody. A nurse who couldn't even afford his own daughter's medical bills. Now he's in her will. He's attending board meetings. She introduced him at the Children's Hospital Gala as her son. My mother is rewriting 30 years of estate planning for a stranger she met 4 months ago. Then we need to change the narrative. Gerald steepled his fingers. Right now, public opinion is against you. The press loves this story. Tragic widower bonds with lonely billionaire. Dying child gets miracle cure. You're the ungrateful son who abandoned his sick mother. We need to flip that. How? Gerald smiled, and it wasn't kind. We expose the contract. We show the world that David Chen is being paid to play house. We reveal the transactional nature of their relationship. People love a redemption story, but they hate being lied to. Once they know he's essentially a high-priced escort for emotional labor, the sympathy evaporates. Marcus considered this. And my mother? We position her as a victim, a vulnerable woman with cancer being exploited by a predator who saw an opportunity. Gerald pulled out his phone. I have contacts at 3 major news outlets. We leak the contract, provide context, and let the feeding frenzy begin. By this time tomorrow, David Chen will be the most hated man in New York. Do it, Marcus said without hesitation. The story broke on a Thursday morning. David was making breakfast for Emma, pancakes shaped like hearts, her favorite, when his phone exploded with notifications, text messages, missed calls, email alerts. He ignored them until Emma left for the kitchen to get syrup, then made the mistake of opening Twitter. The headline from the New York Post was everywhere. Billionaire's son exposed, paid companion in $500K deal. His stomach dropped. The article had everything. Photos of the contract with Catherine's signature. Details about the money wired to the hospital. Quotes from anonymous sources, claiming David had targeted Catherine deliberately, researching her loneliness before orchestrating the lobby incident. The piece painted him as a calculating opportunist who had manipulated a dying woman's desperation for family. His phone rang. The hospital administrator. He answered with shaking hands. David, I need you to come in immediately. We're getting calls from reporters and the board wants to discuss your status. He hung up. Called Catherine. No answer. Called again. Straight to voicemail. Emma came back into the room. Daddy, why do you look scared? He forced a smile he didn't feel. Just work stuff, baby. Eat your breakfast. But the lies were catching up to him faster than he could run. By noon, the story had metastasized. Cable news picked it up. Social media turned vicious. Our paid son trended nationally. People who had championed their story now felt betrayed. The comments were brutal. I knew it was too good to be true. That poor woman, dying and being scammed. He probably planned the whole thing. Disgusting. What kind of person sells companionship to someone with cancer? David's face was everywhere. Grainy photos from the hospital. Screenshots from Catherine's social media. Even his employee ID picture from the hospital database. Reporters camped outside his apartment building. He couldn't leave without microphones being shoved in his face. David, did you target Catherine Wells deliberately? How much money have you taken from her? What do you say to people calling you a con artist? He pushed through them without comment, Emma hidden under his jacket, and drove straight to the hospital. Catherine's suite was surrounded by security. They wouldn't let him up. I'm sorry, sir, Mrs. Wells has requested no visitors except immediate family. I am family, David said desperately. The security guard's expression was sympathetic but firm. Not according to her legal team. David tried calling again. Again, voicemail. He sent texts. He sent dozens of them. No response. He was still standing in the lobby trying to figure out his next move when Patricia from billing approached. Her expression was different now. Not contemptuous. Worse. Pitying. The board met this morning, she said quietly. You're being placed on administrative leave pending investigation. There are questions about whether you violated ethical guidelines by entering into a financial arrangement with a patient. She was never my patient. She was a patient at this hospital. You're an employee. The optics are bad, David. Patricia handed him an envelope. This is official. You're not to return to hospital property until the investigation concludes. He took the envelope numbly. How long? Could be weeks, could be months. She hesitated. For what it's worth, I don't think you're a bad person, but this looks really bad. She walked away, leaving David standing in the same lobby where he had begged on his knees 4 months ago. The same floor, the same fluorescent lights, but everything else had changed. His phone buzzed. Finally, a text from Catherine. His heart leapt, then shattered as he read it. Don't contact me again. My lawyers will handle the contract termination. Emma's treatment will continue as originally agreed, but our arrangement is over. He read it 3 times, trying to find hidden meaning, trying to see past the cold formality to the woman who had cried on his shoulder. But the message was clear. She believed the narrative. Or worse, she didn't care. Either way, he had lost her. The next few days were a blur of hell. The hospital formally suspended him. The story evolved. Now outlets were questioning whether Emma was even really sick, whether David had fabricated or exaggerated her condition to gain sympathy. Reporters tried to interview Emma's doctors. They tried to access her medical records. The hospital threatened legal action, but the damage was done. Emma's school called. Other parents were complaining. They didn't want their children around that situation. The principal suggested homeschooling might be better until things calmed down. Emma cried herself to sleep, asking why people were being mean about Daddy. David had no answer. His neighbors started avoiding him in the hallway. His landlord received complaints about the reporters outside. His bank account, briefly flush with savings from reduced expenses, began to drain as he couldn't work. And through it all, silence from Catherine. He tried to hate her, tried to feel betrayed, but all he felt was hollow. Marcus Wells gave an interview to CNN. The anchor treated him with sympathy, asking softball questions about his mother's condition and his concern for her well-being. Marcus played the role of devoted son perfectly, worried, protective, heartbroken. My mother is vulnerable right now, Marcus said, his voice heavy with manufactured concern. She's facing her mortality, and this man took advantage of that. He saw someone desperate for connection, and he sold it to her. That's not love. That's a business transaction disguised as family. Have you spoken to your mother about this? She's not taking my calls. Marcus's expression was pained. I think she's embarrassed. She's a proud woman. Admitting she was manipulated would mean admitting weakness, and that's not something Catherine Wells does easily. What would you say to David Chen if he was watching? Marcus looked directly into the camera. Return the money. Walk away. Let my mother spend her remaining time with people who actually care about her, not people who see her as a payday. David watched the interview from his darkened apartment. Emma asleep in the next room. He wanted to throw something at the screen, wanted to scream that Marcus was lying, that he had been the one to abandon Catherine, that everything he was saying was a calculated performance. But who would believe him? The court of public opinion had already ruled, and he had been found guilty. 2 weeks after the story broke, David made his decision. He sat at his kitchen table at 3 a.m, staring at a handwritten letter. He had drafted it 17 times, trying to find words that would make Catherine understand. But there were no words. There was only the truth. And the truth was this. As long as he remained in her life, she would be hounded. The press would never let go. Marcus would keep fighting. The narrative would keep poisoning everything they had built. She would die under siege, her final months consumed by scandal instead of peace. He couldn't do that to her. So he wrote a final version of the letter. Short, simple. Catherine, you gave me my daughter's life, and I will never be able to repay that. But I can give you something in return. Peace. I'm ending our arrangement. Not because I don't care. Not because the money matters. But because you deserve to spend your remaining time without this circus. You deserve dignity and quiet, and the chance to heal without cameras and accusations. Marcus was right about one thing. I am taking advantage of you. Every day you defend me is a day you waste energy you need for fighting your cancer. I won't let that continue. Emma asks about you constantly. I tell her you're resting, that you need space. She made you another drawing. I'm enclosing it. I don't know if you'll keep it, but she wanted you to have it. I'm sorry I couldn't be what you needed without destroying everything. Thank you for seeing me, for seeing Emma, for giving us a glimpse of what family could be. David. He enclosed Emma's drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow, labeled, My Family. He mailed the letter to Catherine's office, not the hospital. He didn't want her to see it until after he had disappeared from her daily routine. Then he did the hardest thing he had ever done. He stopped going to the hospital. He stopped calling. He stopped texting. He erased himself from Catherine's life as thoroughly as if their contract had never existed. Emma didn't understand. Why can't we visit Catherine? Did we make her mad? She needs to rest, baby. She's very sick. But she likes when we visit. She told me we make her feel better. I know, but sometimes grown-ups need space. That's a stupid reason. Emma crossed her arms. You're lying. Adults always lie when something bad happens. She was right, but David couldn't tell her the truth. Couldn't explain that he was protecting Catherine by leaving. Couldn't explain that love sometimes meant walking away. So he held his daughter and let her cry, and hated himself for being the cause of more pain in her already difficult life. Meanwhile, in a private suite at St. Augustine Memorial Hospital, Catherine Wells sat alone. She had read David's letter 20 times. The drawing was pinned to the wall above her bed, next to the first one Emma had made. She stared at it until the stick figures blurred. Her assistant had urged her to respond. Her lawyers had urged her to clarify her position publicly, to distance herself from the scandal. Marcus had urged her to file charges against David for fraud. She had ignored all of them, because the truth she couldn't speak aloud without destroying what little protection she could still offer David, was that she didn't believe the narrative. She had read the leaked contract, seen the evidence, watched the media crucify the man who had shown her more genuine care than anyone in her life. And she knew David hadn't manipulated her. She knew he hadn't targeted her. She knew that what had grown between them was real, contract or not. But she also knew that Marcus would never stop. The press would never let go. And David would be destroyed if she kept fighting for him. So she made the same choice he had made. She let him go. She told her security not to allow him up. She didn't answer his calls. She sent a cold, formal text that made her want to vomit. And she broke her own heart to save his life. Late at night, when the nurses weren't watching, Catherine would hold Emma's drawings and cry. She would remember the weight of the little girl in her lap, the sound of David's laugh, the feeling of being wanted for something other than her money. She would remember being real. And then she would fold the memories away and put on her armor and face another day of treatment and tabloids and the slow death of everything she had briefly believed was possible. 3 weeks after David's last visit, Catherine's cancer markers spiked. The doctors increased her treatment. The pain worsened. Her body, which had been responding to therapy, seemed to give up. Dr. Reeves pulled her aside one afternoon. Catherine, you need to talk to someone. Depression affects treatment outcomes. You're losing the will to fight. I'm fine. You're not fine. You've barely eaten in weeks. You don't sleep. You canceled all your upcoming appointments. Reeves's voice was gentle. What happened with David? I don't want to discuss David. He asks about you every day. He calls the nurses' station to check on your condition. Catherine's mask slipped for just a moment. He does? He cares about you. Whatever the press says, whatever that contract was, that man genuinely cares. I've seen enough fake concern in this hospital to know the difference. Reeves sat on the edge of Catherine's bed. You're allowed to fight for people you love, Catherine. Even if it's complicated, even if it's messy. Fighting for him will destroy him. Letting him go is destroying you. Reeves stood. I'm a doctor, not a therapist. But I know this. You were getting better when he was here. You had something to live for. Now you're just going through the motions. Think about that. After Reeves left, Catherine stared at the ceiling for a long time. She thought about David's letter, about his assumption that leaving would give her peace. But there was no peace in this silence. There was only emptiness, and for the first time since the scandal broke, Catherine Wells allowed herself to feel the full weight of what she had lost. Not money, not reputation, not control. She had lost family, and no amount of pride or protection was worth that. Emma Chen was done waiting for adults to fix their mistakes. She was 7 years old, in remission from leukemia, and smarter than every grown-up around her seemed to think. She knew when her father was lying. She knew when he cried in the bathroom at night thinking she couldn't hear. She knew that Catherine, The nice lady who read stories and played chess and made Daddy smile for the first time since Mommy died, had disappeared for no good reason, and she was going to do something about it. It was a Saturday morning when Emma made her move. David had gone to the pharmacy to pick up her maintenance medications, leaving her with Mrs. Rodriguez from next door. Mrs. Rodriguez was nice but old, and fell asleep watching her telenovelas by 10 a.m. Emma waited until the snoring started, then grabbed her backpack, her favorite stuffed rabbit, and the emergency $20 bill her father kept in the kitchen drawer. She wrote a note in her careful 7-year-old handwriting. Gone to fix things. Love, Emma. Then she walked out of the apartment and caught the subway to St. Augustine Memorial Hospital. She had made the trip dozens of times with her father. She knew which train to take, which stop to get off at, which elevator led to Catherine's floor. The security guard at the lobby entrance recognized her and smiled. Hey there, Emma. Where's your dad? Bathroom. Emma lied smoothly. I'm supposed to go up and wait. The guard waved her through without question. Adults were easy to fool if you looked confident. Emma rode the elevator to the 4th floor, her heart pounding. She knew Catherine's room number by heart, 407. She had drawn it on dozens of pictures, always including the number like it was part of Catherine's name. The corridor was quiet. Weekend mornings always were. Fewer nurses, fewer visitors, just the steady beep of monitors and the antiseptic smell Emma had learned to associate with both hope and fear. She stood outside room 407 for a full minute, gathering courage. Then she knocked. Come in, Catherine's voice called, tired and thin. Emma pushed open the door. Catherine was sitting in the chair by the window, wrapped in a cashmere blanket despite the warm spring sunlight. She had lost weight. Her silver hair was thinner, her face more drawn. But when she saw Emma standing in the doorway, something flickered in her gray eyes, something that looked like coming back to life. Emma? Catherine's voice cracked. What are you? Where's your father? Home. Emma walked into the room and closed the door behind her. I came by myself. By yourself? Emma, that's dangerous. You can't. I had to talk to you, and Daddy won't bring me anymore because he's being stupid. Emma climbed onto the chair across from Catherine, her legs swinging. Grown-ups are always being stupid when they're scared. Catherine's lips twitched despite herself. Is that so? Yes, you know it's true. Emma pulled her stuffed rabbit onto her lap. I need to ask you something and you have to tell me the truth. Do you promise? Catherine hesitated, then nodded. I promise. Do you still love us? The question hung in the air like a fragile thing that might shatter. Catherine's hands tightened on her blanket. Emma, that's not an answer. Yes or no? It's not that simple. It is that simple. Emma's voice was fierce with the certainty of childhood. You either love someone or you don't. You either want them around or you don't. Everything else is just adult stuff that doesn't matter. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. Where did you learn to be so wise? Daddy, he says love is the only thing that's real. Everything else is just noise. Emma leaned forward. So do you? Love us? Catherine's carefully constructed walls crumbled. Yes, she whispered. God help me, yes. Then why did you tell us to go away? Because I was trying to protect you both. The press, the scandal, Marcus. It was destroying your father's life. I thought if I let him go, he could have peace. We don't have peace. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Daddy cries all the time. He doesn't eat. He pretends to be okay, but he's not. And I know you're not okay either because Daddy calls the hospital every day to check on you, and the nurses tell him you're getting sicker. He calls? Every single day. Emma wiped her eyes angrily. He thinks I don't know, but I hear him. He asks if you ate breakfast, if you slept, if you're in pain. Then he hangs up and stares at the wall like his heart is broken. Catherine covered her mouth with her hand, a sob escaping. You broke his heart, Emma said, her voice small now. You broke mine too. We were a family, the best family I ever had. And you threw us away because of mean people saying mean things. I didn't want to hurt you. But you did. You promised you wouldn't leave like Mommy did. And then you did anyway. Emma was crying fully now. You promised we'd read the next book together. You promised you'd teach me about the stock market. You promised you'd come to my school play when I got better. You promised. Catherine slid from her chair to her knees in front of Emma, ignoring the pain that shot through her body. She took the little girl's hands. You're right. I broke my promises. I was a coward. Yes, you were. I'm sorry, Emma. I'm so sorry. Emma threw her arms around Catherine's neck, and they cried together. A 7-year-old who had already lost too much, and a 62-year-old who had almost lost everything that mattered. When the tears finally stopped, Emma pulled back. Are you going to fix it? I don't know how. Yes, you do. You're the smartest person I know except for Daddy. Emma's expression was determined. You fight. You tell everyone the truth. You tell them we're your family and you don't care what they think. It's not that easy. Marcus will. Who cares about Marcus? Emma's scorn was absolute. He's mean and he doesn't love you. We do. Aren't we more important than some mean person? Catherine stared at this fierce, bald, beautiful child, who had somehow become the most important person in her world. Yes, she said quietly. You are. Then prove it. Catherine sat back on her heels, her mind working. Emma was right. She had been a coward. She had let Marcus and the press and her own fear dictate her choices. She had protected her pride instead of protecting her family. But it wasn't too late. It was never too late to fight for what mattered. Okay, Catherine said, her voice growing stronger. Okay, I'll fix it. Promise? I promise. Real promise this time. Emma smiled. That gap-toothed smile that lit up rooms. Good. Now can you call Daddy? He's probably freaking out because I left a note. Catherine's eyes widened. You left a note? Yeah. Gone to fix things. I thought it was pretty clear. Despite everything, Catherine laughed. He's going to kill me for letting you come here alone. He'll get over it. Love means forgiving people even when they're stupid. Catherine stood, her joints protesting, and picked up her phone. She had blocked David's number weeks ago. Now she unblocked it with shaking hands and called. He answered on the first ring. Emma, where are you? His voice was frantic. She's here with me, Catherine said quietly. She's safe. Silence. Then, Catherine, I'm sorry for everything, for pushing you away, for believing the lies mattered more than the truth. Catherine's voice broke. Can you come? I need to see you. We need to talk. I'm on my way. David arrived 17 minutes later, breathless from running through the hospital. He burst into the room and swept Emma into his arms, holding her so tight she squeaked. Don't you ever scare me like that again, he said into her hair. I had to. You weren't fixing things fast enough. He set her down and turned to Catherine. They stared at each other across the room, two people who had been broken by the world's cruelty and were somehow still standing. I read your letter, Catherine said. Every day, multiple times. You weren't supposed to keep it. I kept everything, every drawing, every gift, every memory. Catherine took a step toward him. You said you were taking advantage of me, but you were wrong. I was taking advantage of you. Catherine, I paid you to care about me because I was afraid to ask for it freely. I commodified love because it felt safer than trusting it. But what we have, it stopped being a transaction the moment Emma read me that first story. Catherine's eyes were bright with tears. You showed up, David, every single day. Not because you had to, because you wanted to. And I threw that away because I was scared. David crossed the room and took her hands. I walked away because I thought I was protecting you. We were both idiots. Emma contributed helpfully. They laughed through tears, and Catherine pulled David into a hug. He held her carefully, aware of how fragile she had become, how much the cancer had stolen. I'm not doing well, Catherine whispered against his shoulder. The treatment isn't working as well without this, without you both. Then we fight together, David said firmly. No more running, no more protecting each other by leaving. We face whatever comes as a family. Even Marcus, even the press, especially them. Catherine pulled back, wiping her eyes. Then I need to make some calls, starting with my attorney. She picked up her phone and dialed. Gerald, this is Catherine Wells. Fire Marcus's legal team and get me a press conference tomorrow. I'm making a statement, and I don't give a damn what anyone thinks. David watched her transform from the frail woman in the hospital chair to the CEO who had built an empire. It was beautiful and terrifying, and exactly what the situation needed. That night, Catherine called her board of directors into an emergency meeting. She appeared via video conference from her hospital bed, David standing beside her, Emma coloring in the background. Gentlemen, Catherine began, her voice cold as steel. Some of you have contacted my son regarding my mental fitness to lead this company. Some of you have suggested I'm being manipulated, so let me be abundantly clear about my position. She gestured to David. This is David Chen. He's a nurse, a widower, and the best father I've ever witnessed. 4 months ago, I offered him money in exchange for companionship because I was dying alone and desperate. He accepted because his daughter was dying and he was desperate. Yes, there was a contract. Yes, money exchanged hands. But somewhere along the way, something extraordinary happened. Catherine's expression softened as she looked at Emma. I fell in love with that little girl. I fell in love with her father's kindness, his integrity, his capacity to see me as a person instead of a bank account. They became my family, not because I paid them, but because they showed up. They cared. They made me want to live. She turned back to the camera. My son Marcus has spent the last month trying to paint David as a con artist, but the real con artist is Marcus. He's been waiting for me to die so he can liquidate my life's work. Well, I have news for all of you. I'm not dead yet, and when I do die, Marcus won't get a penny beyond his trust fund. Murmurs erupted in the conference room. Catherine spoke over them. I'm establishing the Wells Foundation, effective immediately. David Chen will serve as executive director. The foundation will fund medical research and assist families facing catastrophic healthcare costs. Every property I own, every share of stock, every asset, it all goes to the foundation to help people like David, people who shouldn't have to choose between their dignity and their child's life. One of the board members spoke up. Catherine, this is a decision you should make with a clear head, not in an emotional state. My head has never been clearer. Catherine's smile was sharp. You have 48 hours to decide if you're on board with this vision, or if you'd like to tender your resignation. I'm sure Marcus would be happy to hire you for whatever vanity project he pursues with his inheritance. She ended the call. David stared at her. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, because you were right. Family fights for each other. Catherine reached for his hand. Now comes the hard part. The press conference was scheduled for Sunday afternoon in the hospital's media room. Catherine insisted on attending in person, despite her doctor's protests. She wore her favorite suit, Armani, navy blue, tailored to hide how much weight she had lost. David wore the same wrinkled dress shirt from their first meeting. Emma wore her yellow dress with sunflowers. The room was packed with reporters, cameras, curious onlookers. Marcus sat in the back row, his expression thunderous. Catherine walked to the podium, David and Emma flanking her. The murmurs died down. Thank you for coming, Catherine began. I know there's been significant interest in my personal life recently, so I'm going to address it directly. She pulled out the contract, the original, with both signatures. She held it up for the cameras. This is the agreement between David Chen and myself. Yes, it's real. Yes, money was involved. But let me tell you what this contract actually represents. It represents a dying woman who had given up on human connection offering money because she didn't believe anyone would care about her for free. And it represents a desperate father accepting that offer because the healthcare system failed his daughter. Catherine set the contract down. This piece of paper is the most shameful thing I've ever signed, not because I paid for companionship, but because I had become so cynical that I thought love had to be purchased. She looked at David. David Chen proved me wrong. He could have treated this as a job. He could have shown up, put in his hours, collected his money. But instead, he showed me what it means to actually care about someone. He introduced me to his daughter, even though I was a stranger. He stayed up late playing chess with me when he should have been sleeping. He called me every day from the moment we were separated, not to ask for money but to make sure I was okay. Tears streamed down Catherine's face, but her voice remained steady. I don't know how many months I have left, maybe 6, maybe less. But I know this. I want to spend whatever time I have with the people who make me want to fight. David and Emma Chen are my family, not because of a contract, not because of money, but because they taught me what I should have learned 30 years ago. She turned to look directly at Marcus in the back row. Family is not an obligation. It's not a title you inherit. It's a choice you make every single day. It's showing up when it's hard. It's staying when it would be easier to leave. It's caring more about someone else's happiness than your own comfort. Marcus's face was red with rage, but he stayed silent. Catherine looked back at the cameras. So yes, I paid David Chen, and I'd do it again, because that payment opened the door to the most genuine relationship of my life. What happened after, the love, the laughter, the family we built, that was never for sale. That was grace. She picked up Emma, settling the little girl on her hip despite the pain it caused. This is Emma Chen. She's 7 years old, in remission from leukemia, and the wisest person I know. She came to my hospital room yesterday and asked me one question. Do you still love us? And I realized that everything else, the scandal, the press, the money, the company, none of it matters compared to that question. Catherine kissed Emma's forehead. Yes, baby. I still love you. I will always love you. The room erupted. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. But Catherine didn't answer them. She simply walked off the podium with Emma in her arms and David beside her, leaving the chaos behind. Marcus tried to intercept them in the corridor. You're making a mistake. You're embarrassing yourself. No, Marcus. Catherine's voice was tired but firm. The mistake was thinking you'd ever change. The embarrassment was pretending we were family when we haven't been for years. She shifted Emma to her other hip. You'll get your trust fund. You'll be fine. But you won't get my company and you won't get my time. I'm spending what I have left with people who actually want me alive. Marcus opened his mouth to argue, then seemed to realize there was nothing left to say. He turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. David watched him go. You okay? No, Catherine admitted. But I will be. The media storm that followed was different this time. The narrative shifted. Instead of billionaire scammed by nurse, the headlines read, Dying CEO chooses love over legacy. Instead of condemnation, there was overwhelming support. People shared their own stories of chosen family, of finding connection in unexpected places, of love that transcended transaction. The hospital board voted unanimously to approve the Wells Foundation. David was officially named executive director, with a team of financial advisors and attorneys to help him navigate the complexities. His first action was to establish a fund to cover experimental treatments for children with rare cancers. Emma's drawing, the one of their family holding hands, was framed and hung in the foundation's headquarters. Catherine's health stabilized. The doctors couldn't explain it medically, but Dr. Reeves had a theory. She has something to live for now. Sometimes that's the best medicine we have. 3 months after the press conference, Catherine was released from the hospital. She moved into a brownstone in Brooklyn, close to David and Emma's apartment, with a guest room Emma had personally decorated with drawings and fairy lights. They fell into a routine. David cooked dinner 3 nights a week. Catherine hired a chef for the other 4 because she finally admitted she couldn't boil water without supervision. Emma shuttled between both homes, treating them as one interconnected space. She had 2 bedrooms, 2 sets of toys, and twice as much love as any child could reasonably need. One evening, 6 months after the press conference, they sat together in Catherine's garden. Emma was practicing violin, a new hobby Catherine had encouraged. David was grilling vegetables, something he had learned specifically because Catherine's treatment made her sensitive to heavy foods. Catherine was reading the financial reports for the foundation, occasionally looking up to watch her family. Emma stopped playing mid-song. Catherine, yes, sweetheart? Are you going to die? David froze at the grill. Catherine set down her papers. Yes, Catherine said gently. Someday. Probably sooner than I'd like. Will it hurt? I don't know, maybe. Emma nodded solemnly. I'm glad you're not dead yet. Me too, baby. When you do die, will you still love us? Like Mommy still loves us from heaven? Catherine's vision blurred. Yes, always. Death doesn't stop love. Nothing stops love. Emma seemed satisfied with this answer and went back to her violin. David came over and sat beside Catherine. You okay? She's going to lose another mother, Catherine whispered. I hate that. She's also going to have memories of you that she'll carry forever. That's not nothing. David took Catherine's hand. And she'll have me, and the foundation, and your legacy. You're not leaving her with nothing, Catherine. You're leaving her with everything that matters. Catherine leaned her head on his shoulder. When did you become so wise? I had a good teacher, annoying little 7-year-old, very bossy. They sat together as the sun set, Emma's violin filling the garden with imperfect but beautiful music. 2 years later, Catherine Wells passed away peacefully in her sleep. She was 64 years old. The cancer had finally won its war, but it had lost something important. It hadn't broken her spirit. She died surrounded by family, David holding one hand, Emma holding the other, both of them reading The Velveteen Rabbit aloud because she had asked for it. Her last words were, Thank you for making me real. The funeral was massive. Business leaders, politicians, celebrities, all came to pay respects. But the eulogy wasn't given by a CEO or senator. Emma Chen, now 9 years old and still cancer-free, stood at the podium in her yellow dress with sunflowers. Catherine wasn't my real grandmother, Emma began, her voice clear and strong. She wasn't related to me by blood. She didn't have to love me, but she chose to. And that made her more real than any family I could have been born into. She pulled out a worn piece of paper, the original drawing of their family. I made this when I was 7. I drew 3 people because that's what we were, a family. Not because of contracts or money or what anyone else thought, but because we loved each other. Emma looked at the audience, her eyes fierce. Catherine taught me that family is something you build, not something you're given. She taught me that love is the only thing that makes you real. And she taught me that it's never too late to choose the people who make you want to be better. She held up the drawing. She kept this on her wall until the day she died, because we were her family, and she was ours. And nothing, not death, not time, not anything, can change that. The audience stood and applauded, many wiping tears. David watched his daughter, strong, healthy, alive, and felt Catherine's presence like a hand on his shoulder. She had saved Emma's life with money, but she had saved his life with love. And in the end, love was the only currency that mattered. The Wells Foundation thrived. Under David's direction, it helped thousands of families afford experimental treatments, funded cutting-edge research, and changed healthcare policy nationwide. Every family they helped received a card with Emma's drawing on it, and a simple message: love makes us real. Emma grew up surrounded by the evidence of Catherine's love, not in trust funds or inheritance, but in the lives saved, the families kept whole, the children given second chances. On the 10th anniversary of Catherine's death, Emma Chen, now 19, pre-med at Columbia, cancer-free and thriving, stood in the foundation's headquarters and unveiled a portrait. It showed 3 figures, a man, a woman, and a child, holding hands under a rainbow. Beneath it, a plaque read, Catherine Wells, CEO, mother, family. She taught us that the most valuable things in life can never be bought. They can only be given freely, received gratefully, and loved fiercely. David stood beside his daughter, older now, gray at the temples, but smiling. She'd hate how sentimental this is. No, she wouldn't. Emma linked her arm through his. She kept every drawing I ever made her. She was secretly the most sentimental person alive. Truth. They stood together, looking at the portrait of their family. The family that started with a contract and ended with grace. The family that proved love doesn't need blood, or law, or permission. It just needs people brave enough to show up, and stay, and make each other real.